Hello, congratulations on hitting play on this episode. Whether you are walking or in the car or lying in bed, I'm proud of you for choosing yourself and showing up to learn and expand your mind and the possibilities of your existence. So, this episode is going to be super valuable because I am taking you a little bit behind the scenes into my membership. And I have plucked some of the questions that I've been getting in there recently that I think are going to be the most relevant and relatable. Actually, they're all so relatable. Anytime I get a question, I'm like, I get it, I see you, I've been there. But we're going to cover some that cover a bit of a wide-ish span of topics. So one of them is about boundaries, and we'll get into it. So to give you a little bit of context within the membership, one of the first things you do is you can start a 30-day challenge. So every day you're going to get a new video, which is either a psychology-based teaching from me, which might have some journal prompts, or a somatic therapy exercise. And this allows you to really get a very strong foundation on the topics that are most relevant around healing anxious attachment. So that's boundaries and needs, receiving masculine and feminine energy, all of that really good stuff. And when you do that, it helps the whole community get on the same page, basically, and also makes the live calls a place where we can go even deeper. So of course you can come onto the live calls even if you haven't watched these videos, but they are a super valuable 30-day intensive that you get to begin with. Now, after each of those videos, I always prompt you to ask a question or share an insight, and that's where lots of these questions are coming from. So the first question is on a video that is about boundaries, and the video is specifically called The Pros and Cons of Having Them. But her question was, a big question I have around this topic is that I never know if and how to interrupt someone if I don't like where the conversation is going. Right away, someone else chimed in and said, I agree with this. I was out the other night and there was this one older guy who was drunk and was talking really close to me and wouldn't leave me alone. And I didn't know how to get myself out of the situation. And then the same night, another guy I knew a while ago I ran into, and he just kept talking when I knew I didn't want to engage anymore, but I did it because I felt rude if I said something, and also I just don't know what to say. So the first girl who asked the question replied, I totally understand you. I'd love to find a polite way to lead the conversation in another direction. So I'm sure you've been in one of these situations, or maybe this feels like your everyday life where someone is talking to you or kind of talking at you and they're not really maybe asking you anything, or it doesn't matter. They're just going on and you just don't want to be involved in this conversation. So we think, oh, how can we get out of it? You're kind of maybe looking for your friends or whatever it is. So what I did was I gave them a lot of examples of how we can exit a conversation. And once you hear these, you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, that's so obvious. I just don't think about it in the moment, or I haven't thought to put it that way. Because what happens when we think about exiting a conversation like this, our mind goes, no, don't be rude, don't cause a disruption, don't hurt their feelings. And it actually stops our brain from considering just a loving, gentle exit. So here's what I said. I said, yes, this is a great question. I can think of lots of times I've done this because it doesn't feel worth it. So I've stayed in the conversation because it doesn't feel worth it to risk being rude or offending someone. And it also feels icky to stay in the convo. So it's clearly crossing my own boundary when I know that feeling of this just doesn't feel nice. So let's look at it from 3 different angles. If you're in a conversation with someone who you knew and you maybe wanted to stay engaged with, but you wanted to skip that specific topic, you could say, this isn't something I want to talk about right now, or this isn't something I want to share about right now. Or, can I ask for a pause in this conversation? I'm noticing I really don't want to talk about that. And then you just let the other person respond. Now, if you want out of the conversation, you might say something like, hey, I actually came here with my friends and I'm going to focus on spending the evening with them. Thanks for the chat. Cheers. Have fun. Or you could say, I need to excuse myself, but I hope you have a great night. Or you could say, I'm going to step out and check in with some friends. Thanks for chatting. And then you walk away. Finally, if you feel that they're being rude or too much, you don't have to be afraid to let that show through your body. You can pull your body back. You can close your body off if you know that this person is being rude. It's part of how we communicate with each other. But you might say, I think I need to wrap this up here. Take care. You might say, I don't feel comfortable continuing this conversation. Have a good evening. You might say, I'm stepping away now. Please have a good night. And then just physically remove yourself without waiting for a response. You might say, I'm not comfortable with this, so I'm going to leave now. When you hear me say these options, they all might feel uncomfortable, but that's the edge that you are working with. It's choosing the boundary even when it feels uncomfortable. So I want you to kind of think about what I said and think about, if you were in that situation, which response would feel the most accessible. All right, we're moving on to our second question. And this question was asked within a training that's called Self-Sustained Fulfilling Your Own Emotional Needs. Fulfilling our own emotional needs and knowing how to is a really important part on the anxious attachment journey. So her question was, thanks for this video. I found it really useful and I think I'll keep coming back to it. One thing I'm struggling with is working out what is a genuine need and what is me attempting to seek validation. For example, I feel like being told I'm loved and physical affection are genuine needs, but now I'm wondering if this is me just outsourcing. So this is not the first time I have gotten this version or a version of this question. It actually comes up a lot. It's a really good question. So the truth is that there is a bit of an art to discerning what is coming from a need versus what is outsourcing our validation. And ideally, nothing has to be urgent. So if you urgently feel like you need to hear that you're loved, that's probably a sign that your inner child is freaking out. The energy behind it feels desperate or seeking or out of control in any way. That's when we're probably outsourcing. If you know that for your partner, he is going to respond probably kindly and generously when you ask for something like a hug or some affection, but it's you that feels scared to ask, then it's your work to lean into that from him. If you're in a relationship with someone who isn't touchy and you've spoken that need or desire and it's just kind of in their nature right now to not be super physically affectionate, then you have two options. Then you either work to self-soothe and you enjoy when he is offering physical touch without trying to create any story that it's not enough or you're not enough or it's about you. That's all part of the work. Or you consider if this partner, the way that he is and the way that he's willing to show up, can actually meet this need for you long term. So I know that it's not a very black and white answer. It really comes back to what's the energy behind it and how it feels for you. And maybe you can have this conversation with your partner too. You can have them reflect back to you when they think you're potentially coming from a place of manipulation or wanting them to do something or kind of trying to exert some sort of control or demand versus being able to be in a healthy, loving dynamic where needs are communicated, but if they aren't met perfectly all the time from the other person, you still know that you're okay. All right, so our third example is a question that was from a video that's called Mapping and Releasing Control in the Subconscious. And I love the topic of control, even though it's not fun. It's so freaking liberating when you can see all the ways that you try and control and then let go of it. So much of reality is out of our control. So she said, it's interesting for me because control is a place of comfort, so it doesn't seem negative. When I'm in control, I know that I'm safe. My little inner child's whole goal is safety and protection. And I've done the work to know that even if I'm not in control, I'm able to survive any situation. I've demonstrated that over decades of time. But what it has created is this isolated place because I never look to others for support and I default to doing everything myself. If other people present any inconsistencies that don't align with my boundaries, I simply cut them off because it's easier than giving energy to what feels like an unsafe situation. I feel very stuck in this cycle of setting boundaries in order to feel that my needs are being met, but then isolating because it feels unsafe to let people in. So as you listen to that question, you can kind of feel this journey within her where part of her can see where the control is actually a rigid boundary. It leaves her feeling isolated. She doesn't let other people in. And on the other side, she knows that the more in control she is, the more safe she tends to feel. And then there's a part of her that knows, the probably more conscious adult mind, where she said, I've done the work to know that even if I'm not in control, that I am able to survive. And I've demonstrated that over decades of time. So that's important. That's an important piece to realize when it comes to letting go of unnecessary overthinking or trying to control, is the self-trust piece, and that's what she's pointing to. But what I gave her feedback on was this idea of where the control and that rigid boundary creates isolation. So I told her, cool that you can see this so clearly, and I totally get the feeling of liking control because it feels safe. to that, it's worth exploring where we assert control in a way that drains us. So if it's overthinking, overhandling, overfunctioning, even though there is a sense of safety on the other side of that, what is the cost? How much energy is that actually draining? And is there an opportunity for us to just not do that, maintain our energy, and then maybe sit in the little bit of discomfort that comes with it, but that isn't actually unsafe, because that part's often an illusion. I also said to her, it sounds like when others present inconsistencies and you cut them off, there isn't room or opportunity for communication. So if this is the case, what we can try and do instead is communicate to the people we are relating to what we expect, what we love, what we desire out of friendships or romantic relationships. And sometimes people just need to be invited into a higher mode of operating, and they're actually happy to do so. They need someone to see their power and see their ability, and they're just actually waiting to step up and show up for someone like that, but they just have to feel like the other person cares and the other person is willing to be in a mutual dynamic like that. I think in this day and age, depending on the setting you live in, we can be in environments where we're just constantly meeting new people all the time, and people start to blur together and be anonymous, and we start to lose the energy for caring about strangers, because it's like, oh, how long are you actually going to be in my life? Is this going to go anywhere? Do I actually want to spend my energy talking to you at this random house party? You know, it can be this like, what do you have for me kind of thing. But when we can bring our intention into a relationship or a friendship and say, hey, this is how I show up for my friends, this is how I show up in relationships, this is what I expect, then it's like, oh wow, you are seeing me, and you are seeing this as an asset that you are putting your time and attention into. And if you see it that way, then okay, yeah, I'm happy to see it that way, you know? So people might step up when we just when we request that from them, or just share what our values are. I also said to her, in another case, when the topic is about letting people in, then your practice is to find those small opportunities. So when we notice that we have blocks within our system around receiving, letting people get close to us, letting people hold us, or letting ourselves lean on them, if you know that that's a block that's keeping you feeling alone and isolated, and like no one sees you and no one's doing anything for you, no one's helping you, that's where we need to start looking for the small opportunities. So it is not a 0 to 100 process where all of a sudden you're this open person who can just receive from life and be in the flow of the universe. Like, that would completely blow your nervous system to wreck, because something would go wrong and then your nervous system would freak out and you would want to go back into your self-isolating, hyper-independent cave. So this might start with receiving from someone before actually needing to let them into your inner world or into your past, if we're talking about a romantic dynamic. And receiving from someone might be letting them pick you up for a date, or just do something for you, or handling something for you. So receiving what's already there and willing to be given. For example, someone offers to pick you up, someone offers for you to choose the restaurant, someone offers to meet you halfway, or like come to your neighborhood instead of meeting you halfway. Can you notice where there's already something on the table that you're just allowed to take because someone else put it on the table and offered it to you, without making any story about needing to owe them something, and just trusting them that if they put that offer out, it is for you and you are safe and okay to receive it. That would be step 1. Step 2 might be asking someone for something, asking them to come to your neighborhood instead of meeting them halfway, asking if you can go to your favorite restaurant. And that is the first steps of creating like a receiving piece in your dynamic that might often be only giving. After that, then there might be space to practice letting someone in on a more emotional level, or as I said, in regards to your past or your process. But the point is to really titrate this for your nervous system, little bits at a time, in order to feel safe as you open up. Because I know that there's part of you that knows on the other side of that opening, there is so much love to be felt from another person. And I know that part of you wants to be able to just rest into someone else, this part of you that's so tired of holding everything and holding yourself, just waiting for that, but it also feels so unsafe. So we want to slowly stretch that edge until it will feel safe. And when it's safe and you get to be in reciprocal relationships where you receive, trust me, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to have this neutral experience around receiving when there's no fear linked to it. It also makes us a more generous person. It makes us very clear on what we can give, what is our capacity without it crossing our boundaries. And yeah, there's so much just gold and juice on the other side of that. Okay, I'm gonna leave this here. We broke down 3 different questions slash situations from members in the group. I would love to know if this type of episode was valuable for you. You can message me on Instagram about it. My handle is in the show notes. As always, you are so invited into my membership space. We have live calls now that we are in 2025. We've done 1 month of live calls already in January, which has been so epic to meet people in real time. And we have another workshop coming up on February 6th, which is going to be all about healthy relating. Also, final note, there is currently an offer for an annual subscription to this membership, which is 40% off what you would normally pay if you were paying month to month. You might have already heard me say that at the start of this episode, but that is available for you also in the show notes. So I'd love to work with you. I'd love to meet you. And until then, I'm sending you so much love.